Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Sudio. Sudio is revolutionizing the way people see headphones with a unique approach of blending their sleek Scandinavian designs with cutting-edge technology that matches the quality of even the highest-rated headphones on the market for a fraction of the cost. I will only accept sponsors on this show who have products or services that I personally use and believe in, and Sudio certainly meets those requirements. I have their on-the-ear model that they call the Regent. You know, these are those big leather bad boys that go over half your head, but I love them because they're super comfortable. They have Bluetooth capabilities, and most importantly, they have an amazing battery life of 24 plus hours of active use and 20 days of standby life. I can use them all week without having to recharge them, which I absolutely love. And the best part is that they're actually affordable. And as a listener of this show, you'll get an additional 15% off with discount code Millennial15. That's MILLENNIAL 15. So check them out at studiosweden.com. I really enjoy these headphones, and I think that you guys will as well. And you can find that link in the show notes.
Sean Connery was playing William Forster, a writer, right? And he was teaching this young kid how to write. And the kid's sitting in front of this old punch typewriter. And finally he starts screaming at him, "Start punching the keys. Just start punching the keys." And that one scene stuck in my head for years and years and years. You gotta get started.
Hello, and welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Mulvey. If you're a millennial looking for actionable advice and a proven formula on how to build the life of your dreams, then this is the show for you. Each week, I'll be connecting with inspiring guests who will be sharing their wisdom on how to reach success. So if you're ready to take your life to the next level, buckle up and enjoy the ride. What's up, folks? Welcome to the show. Today's guest is executive chef Charles Carroll. Not only is Charles the executive chef at one of the highest rated country clubs in the country, but also an author, Culinary Olympic gold medalist, and past president of the World Association of Chefs Society. Chef Carroll takes pride in mentoring students, for which he's written the award-winning books Leadership Lessons from a Chef, Finding Time to Be Great, and his other literary masterpiece, Tasting Success, Your Guide to Becoming a Professional Chef. His third book, The Recipe, just hit shelves this past weekend. You may recall this title as his co-author, John David Mann, was on the show back in episode 75. In this episode, we dive into his epic experiences, including his first Culinary Olympic gold medal at age 24, his strategy of building teams up to 75 staff members, and the life lessons that he's learned along his journey. I love this conversation because of the unique perspective Chef brings to the table. He is literally one of the best chefs in the world. And that's not just some overstatement that I'm throwing out there. It's a fact that is backed up by his 8 trips to the Worldwide Culinary Olympics over the past 3 decades, during which he's taken home multiple gold medals as both a competitor and a coach. It was a super cool opportunity for me personally to connect with Chef Carroll, and I think that you guys are going to get a ton out of this episode. So with that, let's dive right into it. Please enjoy this episode with Chef Charles Carroll. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. As always, I am thrilled to have you here today. Very grateful for you taking time out of your busy day to stop by and see what's going on here at the Millennial Mastermind. And today we have an awesome guest who is probably is the first person from the culinary world to be joining our show. So, Chef Charles Carroll, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Brian.
So, like I was saying, you're a bit of a unique guest on this show. Usually we have people who are either business owners or coming from the business world or authors, which you've done a little bit in some of those regards, but your primary background is coming from being a chef in the culinary world. And for me to give background on your diverse bio and history and what you've accomplished would probably do it an injustice. So to kick things off, would you mind just giving a quick overview, if that's even possible with all the accomplishments, of your background, where you've been, kind of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Obviously, I'm a chef at the River Oaks Country Club in Houston, Texas, and it's one of the top 3 busiest clubs in the United States. It's very busy. I have 75 chefs, 3 restaurants, and 6 kitchens, and we do about 100 parties a week, 80 to 100 a week. And I grew up in the culinary field at a country inn. My dad's a chef, my brother was a chef, and so I was, 2nd, 3rd grade, already working 8 days a week, and started cooking breakfast in 3rd grade, and just kind of never knew anything else. And went to the Culinary Institute of America, and I've only had 3 jobs in my life: the Balsams Grand Resort Hotel in Northern Tippett, New Hampshire, and then Rochester, New York. I was at Oak Hill Country Club, and now River Oaks in Houston. Along the way, I was blessed enough to be a part of 8 different Culinary Olympic teams. And believe it or not, there is a Culinary Olympics that happens every 4 years, just like the Sports Olympics, and it's pretty intense. You can pretty much relate it to sports, as you have to do the trials and the different cook-offs to get on the Olympic teams, and then you practice for 3 or 4 years, and then you go compete all over the world. And so that has been a big highlight in my life of standing on stage and representing the United States and winning gold medals. And so that was a big part of my life, actually, in starting the team building concepts, and which I've been able to instill in the 3 properties that I work at. And then also inspired my first book, Leadership Lessons from a Chef, Finding Time to Be Great. And that book, along with Tasting Success, is in 40 schools around the United States on how to build teams. So and it was written in a club environment, and the books do very well in the schools because it's written by a chef in a kitchen, not a professor. And so at some points, you kind of get in their face a little bit and teach the young people how to chew off the end of the table or do whatever it takes to be successful. And so that was a big part of my life, and went to Afghanistan 3 different times and did things for our troops and put shows on and fed them. And fast forward to today, we have our 3rd book coming out, The Recipe, and that comes out in October. So just gone a kind of wild roller coaster ride, and very blessed.
Yeah, that's an amazing journey. And listeners of this show may be familiar with The Recipe, as your co-author, John David Mann, was on just a few short episodes ago, and we talked through some of his perspective of the book. But it's a fascinating story from what it sounds like, and I would love to get your perspective he's coming kind of from the writer's side of it, where he's done parable-style books like that in the past. But how did this whole concept of The Recipe come up for you, and how did that show up on your plate?
Well, I wrote a start of a manuscript about 7 years ago, and bumped into John on the internet, and we started a relationship. And so, I mean, the 3rd book, I wrote kind of in a parable style, and I have big dreams and aspirations, and I wanted it to become a movie. Of course, why not? Yeah, I wanted to see it in every airport bookstore and Barnes & Nobles and everything else. So it's a bit different book than I've ever written, and so it's not a true story about me, about my life, but it's a lot of truisms, a lot of things in the book that I know of. There's a diner there. My dad owned a diner in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, and it was called Mapletown Dinette. And so John was creative enough to preserve the Mapletown and call the town in New England Mapletown. And of course, my dad was a chef, and so a lot of things in the book. There's as a little boy, it's a wonderful story, and about a little boy that gets himself in a little bit of trouble at a young age, loses his father, and so he's mad at the world, mad at God, and one of his dad's old buddy, his crusty old military buddy that owns the diner, sees the boy get in trouble, and he pulls him in. So every chapter is a life lesson, and every chapter they cook something. And every time I explain that one line, life lessons and cook something, I see everyone's light bulb go off in their head, because, I mean, how true is food? I mean, compared to life, and you got to be patient with your food, and you got to, if you want to grow in your garden, you got to plant a seed, and you got to harvest it, and you got to water it, and you got to take care of it, and then hopefully one day harvest that vegetable, and then, so I mean, it's so many mentoring, wonderful storylines in the book, and so I'm very passionate about it, and it is also an emotional roller coaster. We take you on a pretty good ride, and what John and I have enjoyed, is that a lot of the people on the launch team, said the book just really stays with them, for several weeks after. So that's what we're kind of going after. So we're excited.
I love that. And so I know you mentioned that some of it is based off of truisms in your own life and your own journey. Is there one particular lesson that you tried to portray with the book that was a true lesson that you learned along your path that you would be willing to share with the audience, that has been something that's really been fundamental in your success and to getting to where you are today with all of the different triumphs that you've had over these past several years?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And yeah, I would say there's several. Trying to jog my memory, but I think one of the most important, not to give the story away too much, because everybody has to go out and buy the book, Brad.
Yeah, right.
Though probably one of the most important ones in the story is never forget where you come from. It's a sleepy little town in New England, and the boy, obviously, he's mentored by the chef, and he starts to grow up as a young man, and he becomes successful. And in one of the life lessons that I've always preached with my staff and my team is never forget where you come from. And so that's an important lesson that's in the book. And also, my experience with building teams, that's one of the chef's rules in the book is build your team. And you can never be afraid to, in lessons in life and in business, a lot of your listeners out there today are younger people coming up through the ranks, and when you're first growing and you're first starting your first lessons of the ladder or getting successful, many times that's done as an individual, and then you become getting yourself into a business, and slowly as you get your first position and your second position up the ladder, you have to quickly realize that it's no longer an individual effort. It might have been an individual effort to get there, to be recognized, to get hired, to get into that company, but you need to quickly realize that it takes a team to be successful, and you can't be afraid to hire people more talented than you are. You can't be afraid to, you can't pretend to know it all, and the sooner you realize that, the better off you'll be. I mentioned I have 75 employees in 6 different kitchens, and the last thing, and a lot of chefs make the mistake that it's my way or the highway, and this is the way I'm going to do it. But the moral of that story is a chef isn't in the trenches every single day cooking in every single kitchen. He's not, or she's not. So the sooner you realize you have to listen to your people and listen to everyone's ideas, and the one that's best may not be yours. And so the sooner you realize that too, the better off you'll be and the stronger team you'll have. And not only that, Brad, but when you start listening to people and the people realize, your team, your staff realize they have a voice and what they say that you're actually considering, and if you adopt one of their ideas or concepts and it gets put into place, then they bought in. They're a part of it, and that's a big aha moment. If some of the young people haven't experienced that, when you start building that team in, they will jump into a hole and fight with you.
So, Chef Carroll, as you talk through building a team, and as you mentioned, you have 75 members on yours, What do you look for when you're hiring new employees for the kitchen and new people to bring onto that team?
Heart. The number one answer is heart. I will take a young person in my kitchen that has heart over the resume every time. And, someone could come in with a killer resume, but if they sit there and they're not quite sure if they want to take the job and they know they can do it, but that kind of thing, I'd rather take the person that's willing to chew off the end of the table to do whatever it takes to be successful. That's the person I want. So that's pretty straightforward and cut and dry.
And how do you identify that when you're talking to them or interviewing them? How can you really tell whether or not somebody has that heart that you're looking for?
That's a good question. I guess they have to prove it to me, and I'm not right all the time either during the interview process. But so if someone doesn't interview well, then that obviously is a strike against them, unfortunately. So I would encourage young people to go through it in their minds and to walk into our club. It's pretty, it's a pretty scary process because it's so big, and if you're not used to a property that big, it can be intimidating. So I would practice with people and practice the interviews, but they have to come in and just tell me why they want to cook. There's an old saying that an angry cook can't cook good food, and when you watch people cook, you can almost tell. Are they cooking with passion? Are they smelling the food? Are they tasting the food? Are they just following a recipe, throwing the stuff in the pot and then sauteing? So you kind of detect on how they're talking. Why do they want the job so bad? Where do they see themselves in 4 or 5 years? What do they want from me? Lots of times I can be a lot more successful as a chef, as a boss, if I'm not just hiring for me, I'm hiring for them as well. We're proud to say at our club that I think we've had 11 or 12 now executive sous chefs move on to get their first executive chef job. So they're coming in, they're doing the job I need them to do, and hopefully they make that position better. But at the same time, I want to find out what they want to accomplish and what their goals are so I can help them get there too. So, that way they're vested in the job and they're going to hang around because I know that I'm going to help them.
That strikes such a chord when you say that you can tell how they feel by how they're cooking and if they're putting passion into what they're doing. And I think that translates into a lot of areas. I know for me, for example, if I have a podcast episode and I come in and I'm just having a really rough day, have some things going on in my personal life, whatever, you can hear that on the other end. And I've listened back on some of those and I go, it comes through that there's something else going on. And it sounds like that's the case in your world as well. And I'm sure it is in any world where if you can really portray your emotions through the work that you put in, and being able to get yourself aligned with what you're doing and get yourself mentally and emotionally right for the job at hand, then that's going to come across in the work that you put out there. So I thought that's a really interesting point that you brought up there.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, when I wake up, my day starts, and I try to teach that because, a lot of people today, they don't start thinking until after they punched in, they get their cup of coffee and they go to the station. And it's okay, where do we start? I mean, that to me is, you're already late. If you show up 5 minutes early, you're already late for work. So, I mean, your day needs to start when you wake up in the morning, and you just start running through your head what your day is going to be like and setting yourself up for success.
So when you wake up and your day starts right there, is there a particular routine that you go through to start getting yourself moving and start getting the day off on the right foot, or how do you usually kick it off?
Yeah, I do have a routine. I wake up in the morning and I come down. I gotta get my coffee first. So it's usually around 6 a.m. I'll wake up and I'll get the coffee and I'll turn the TV on so I can get the news, because as you know, in Houston we've had a lot of challenges here the last couple of weeks. So I turn the news on and I half listen to that just in case there's something important that I need to be listening to, and then I check all my emails. One of the things I mention to you, well, I failed to mention is I'm the past president of the World Association of Chef Society. That's 10 million chefs in 105 countries.
Wow.
And that was a hell of a responsibility that I wasn't actually looking for. It just kind of ended up, that's a long story, but I ended up becoming the president. And so those mornings, that was a rough 2 years for me. That was on average about 100 emails a day, 70 or 80 first thing in the morning, and another 20, 25 in the afternoon when Asia wakes up. And so I'd have to get up. Those days I would get up at 5:30 in the morning and just start rifling through emails because I need to get through them.
Mm-hmm.
And then in all those emails is a couple from our club. So we'll have the news of the day, what's scheduled for that day. And of course, I already know those things, but it's another checkpoint in my head. Okay, I remember that. We got to start on those things. So I'll go through my own personal checkpoints, and if I have to, I'll send a couple text messages to my staff that might be already the AM crew that's already there. So we'll do all that, and then so by the time I'm on my way to work at 8 o'clock, I've already started the day.
You mentioned earlier that the name of one of your books was Leadership Lessons from a Chef, Finding Time to Be Great. And I think that given everything that you've accomplished and that 2-year stint as the president of the World Association of Chef Societies, I think that it's pretty accurately named of finding time to be great, because it sounds like there was quite a bit on your plate. So when you were, especially in that 2-year sprint of being the president of this organization, still being the executive chef, having all these responsibilities on your table, what were your key takeaways about finding the time and actually managing your time to be able to do and manage all these different responsibilities that you had in front of you?
Yeah, isn't that a great title? I mean, in fact, when I first wrote the book, it's a long story, but I got off the plane to go into my mom's birthday, and I was reading a book that was inspiring me, and so I got off the plane. I told my dad, you know what, I'm going to write a book. And he says, good for you, get in the car. And I said no. And that was in January. And so long story short, by July I had a contract.
Wow.
And I didn't know how to write a book from anything, but I got off that plane in January. I said it's going to be called Finding Time to Be Great, because one of the things that I'm sure it's in any industry, but as a chef, you're working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week on a normal week. And then if you're doing anything outside of which I have 100 projects, I'm working on 4 or 5 projects right now outside of work. And the job itself is enough for anybody to deal with alone. And so I wanted to call it Finding Time to Be Great. And everybody loved it, but you said they have to have another title so people know a little bit more. So that's where Leadership Lessons from a Chef came in. But it's an absolute truth because there are many days, and I'm sure it's comparable to any company, that it's all we can do just to get the food out. 100 parties a week, 80 to 100 parties, just get the food out is all we can do. 7, 8, 10 parties a day. And how on earth are you going to stop and inspire somebody? How are you going to try to build better teams? How are you going to try to help somebody else accomplish their goals if you can barely get out of the day alive? So the moral to the story and the answer to your question is, and especially when I became World Chef's president, is you got to trust your people. And so those 2 years, I had to back away a little bit from the operation. And the lesson is you got to make sure you get good people, and you got to make sure you give them whatever they need to be successful. So you can't be, again, you have to listen. So you takes to be successful in their stations, and then just get out of the way and let them do their job. So that's kind of the answer to that question, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to know, so what did that look like for you when you assembled this great team and you got to this point where you can trust them, you give them the tools that they need to be successful and to kind of run. So what would like a day look like for you where you might have to hand off some responsibilities to your team and trust them to be able to do the job without you there, so you can handle something else? Is there an example of kind of what that might look like in practice?
Sure. I mean, so I have a very large property. So, every morning I walk the entire property and I say hello to everybody, say good morning to everybody, check in with all my sous chefs, and then I make it back to my office. And then I bang out a couple things in my office. And then when the first parties come up, banquet-wise, I would jump out on the line and I would start plating with the team. So I see all the food that leaves the kitchen. And then I'll make one more round around lunchtime and then go back in my office, do some more work, and then come back out for all the dinner plate-ups. So in theory, I'm touching all the food as it goes out. It doesn't mean I'm not prepping hardly anything, but at least I see everything that leaves the kitchen. So when this started happening, there were some of those days where I couldn't get back out in the kitchen. In that case, you have to make sure that your lead people are putting their eyeballs on the food like you were, and you're giving them more responsibilities. So I would double check with them and put my hand on their shoulder and said, hey, did you taste this? Did you taste that? Did you see this product going out? And I would tell them, you got to be my eyes today. And there's a certain amount of responsibility when your boss comes up, puts his hand on his shoulder and say, hey, I need you to do my job. I want you to be me today. So that's kind of cool, and they're going to, pull up the bootstraps a little bit more. And before you can be a chef, you got to act like a chef. Before you can be the general manager, you got to act like a general manager. You have to read what the general manager is reading. What is he doing to be successful? What does he study or she study? So that's important. So it's about empowering your people. And again, it goes back to being a good manager. Don't have all the answers. Listen to your people and empower them to make the right decision. I tell my people all the time, if you make a mistake, that's fine. Everybody makes mistakes, but I just don't want you to serve the mistakes.
Mm-hmm. That's a great line. It's fine to have a mistake, just don't serve the mistake. But to go back to one thing you said there, you talked about going around and actually putting your hand on their shoulder. Was that an intentional act? Is that something that you kind of thought through of actually the effect that gesture has of actually walking up, actually, making physical contact with them in that moment? Or is that just kind of something that you started doing as time on the job rolled and as you gained more experience?
It probably came after gaining more experience, but early on, because my Olympic experience taught me that at a very early age. So if you go to get a glass of water, you get everybody a glass of water. I'm talking about you get to talk about on a hotline when it's 90 degrees and you want to get water for yourself, you go get it for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so the kitchens we're a family. We sit down, we have lunch together. So yeah, hand on the shoulder all the time. And hugs. Yeah, we give away hugs in the kitchen. I'm not afraid to tell you that. And so it is an emotional. And when this whole thing happened in Houston this past couple of weeks, we're cooking family meals for people to take home with them, to give their families who lost their cars, their automobiles, a foot or 2 feet of water in their house. We're cooking family meals for some of their families and finding clothing for them. So we're very close knit. And one thing too, Brad, I wanted to mention with what does it look like when I had to pick up some other responsibilities outside of my job was to make sure you bring back. As a World Chef President, I was traveling, about 125, 140,000 miles a year, and that's quite a few trips, and all over the world. So wherever I went, I made sure I brought those either life lessons or recipes or pictures of food or inspirations. Whatever I learned or saw or did, I brought it back and I gave it to my sous chefs and I shared it with them so they could be part of it. Because it was no joy run for me. It was a lot of hard work. So if you got to share with your people in order for them to be invested in you leaving all the time.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because those are the experiences that probably help you grow, differentiate yourself, really change the status quo by being able to take from each of those experiences and bring it back and share it with those around you. Is there any example of one of those that comes to mind of you going out on one of these trips and coming back with just something unique for your sous chefs that helped benefit the entire team?
Oh, sure. When I went to India, I picked up 2-3 cookbooks, and I got a lot of gifts when I was in India. And so I'd come back and I would share some of these books with the sous chefs and give them gifts. I'd give them gifts when I came back almost every trip. And Next thing I know, the following week, the vegetarian special of the week was an inspiration from India. And that's what it's about. So when you're going away, it's not just looked at more work for them. They also look at it like, I wonder what we're going to get when he comes back.
Right.
I wonder what kind of experience he's going to be able to share with us when he comes back.
Very cool. And so you mentioned that obviously it's been a pretty hectic span of time there in Houston with the flooding and the hurricane and everything there. Have there been any challenges? Obviously there's been a lot of challenges, but has there been any experiences that you've taken away from this time that you think looking forward will be something that you carry with you and something that makes you and your team better because of this experience and because of the challenges that you have to overcome?
Well, that's a pretty big question because I've been through, I think this is a third or fourth hurricane, but this one was really surreal for me. I mean, Ike that was a scary one because that was a Cat 3 and it was supposed to be a 4 or 5. And after I lived through the 3, I'm thinking, God, I never want to do that again. Mm-hmm. And this one was a lot like I forgot the name of the other one now, but when the hurricane came in, just sat on us. We knew it was going to be like that. So the emotional part was, our family was blessed. We were dry. We had power. Our kids were safe. And so that was all good. But now we're sitting in a house with 2 spare bedrooms with power, with food to eat, and some of our dearest friends and employees were being flooded out. Friends of ours that they're pregnant and have 2 kids, and they lost both cars, and they had to be rescued out by a boat. And there's nothing that we could do. We were so helpless. And it's the worst feeling in the world. And we were flooded in, so we couldn't leave, or no one could get to us either. But we weren't in danger. So it's miserable and it's emotional, and you can sit there and just cry in front of the TV because you're seeing the neighborhoods of places and people that there. So we had a great support system, and I don't want to bore you with that, but the club was dialed in. We had everybody's numbers. We were cooking meals for our staff the second we got into the club before we even opened up. So the support that way was overwhelming from the membership and the employees.
That's great. And so to turn things a little bit, I just wanted to go back to your back to earlier in your career, and I believe that I read that you had won your first gold medal at the Culinary Olympics around the age 24. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So if you could go back in time, knowing everything you do now, having experienced all of the successes and all of the challenges you have up to this point, and you can go to yourself just before those Culinary Olympics when you went on to win the gold, is there one piece of advice that you would give to yourself at that point in the game?
Well, I was a young fellow back then, and I was a sous chef as well, so at a very big property then. And so I had a lot of responsibilities. I was basically running, the resort kitchen under the executive chef. And so I had a huge amount of responsibility. So when the Olympics came around, I had a ton more. So I'm working roughly 80, 90 hours a week, sometimes 100 hours a week. And it's hard to stay focused. It's hard to see everything, hear everything, and be the leaning ear to your staff when you're so high strung. And when you're at a young person, you're about to compete in the World Culinary Olympics. I mean, you have tunnel vision. I mean, you are so dialed in on winning that gold medal and not letting your team down that sometimes you're letting your team down right there in your home court. But it never got out of hand. But I remember that, it was a tough situation, me leaving a lot there, competing and coming back. And I wasn't necessarily sharing the entire experience with everybody. And that's where I learned that lesson. So I would probably, and how would I know? I hadn't done it before, and no one at the property had done it before. So I hadn't learned that lesson yet. So I guess I'd be, one of the things I teach is, you're climbing a ladder as a young person. You got to take it one rung at a time. You can't take it 5, 6 rungs at a time, or step over people or step on people to get the next one. You can't do that. You have to, and that's where the individual effort and team effort comes to play. That as long as you climb in the ladder and you pull everybody up there with you, then you'll be successful. So just be cognizant of that. And I was interviewing somebody the other day, Brad, and he said something that was so amazing. It was so real for me, and it was that I was telling him that he had the magic of lighting up an entire room every time he walked into it. How did he have that? How can you bottle this thing that made everybody feel so special? And he was an amazingly successful banker and a special man for the entire city. And he said, Chef, many times people go into a room as a businessman, and they're smart enough to realize they can pick out weaknesses in people. The secret is not to take advantage of those weaknesses in particular individuals, but as a successful person, take those weaknesses and help that person get raised to the level that they can get to. So A, you need to recognize it, and B, you need to be smart enough to help that person reach their goals. And it was so profound to me when he said it, that it was a life lesson just hearing him say that. So that's what I'd say. And a lot of people ask me, how do you do all this? How do you do? You got 4 projects going on. How do you manage all this? And Brad, if I could leave everybody with one thing, and when they ask you this, how do you do it? I honest to God believe that everybody has this thing inside them. Everybody has this thing, and it's up to them to find it. And I'm blessed to have a dozen of them, and I have like 4 new ones every year. And a lot of people never tap that thing inside them, and that's that thing in your heart that makes you jump out of bed in the morning and want you to go after it. And if you can just let yourself go and dare to do that thing, first of all, you have to find it and then get started. So to be successful and to achieve these amazing goals, I have one advice to you, and that's get started. Just get started. There's a movie that I love. I think it's called Finding Forrester, and it was back, 15 years ago. I don't know why it stays in my head. Sean Connery was playing William Forrester, a writer, right? And he was teaching this young kid how to write. And the kid's sitting in front of this old punch typewriter. And finally he starts screaming at him, start punching the keys. Just start punching the keys. And that one scene stuck in my head for years and years and years. You got to get started. And that's what I would really try to pound into all your listeners. And as sure as I'm sitting here today, I'm telling you the truth that I have done the impossible things. Afghanistan. Who goes to Afghanistan as a civilian? Nobody does that. And I just kept punching and punching and punching. And I could tell you a dozen more stories. Writing 3 books. Meeting John Mann to write the recipe. He's one of the best, most talented writers in the country today, a national best-selling author. I got to him, and the podcast, and I'm working on a TV show. What do I know about TV shows? Nothing. I've already had 80 or 90 meetings, and we're getting close. So I think that's my biggest story for people, is just to keep punching.
I love it. Just start punching. So, Chef, if people are really picking up what you're throwing down on this episode and they want to learn more about you, where can they find you? Where can they find links to the recipe and all of your other books and any other resources that might be out there that they can access?
First of all, chefcharlescarroll.com. That's my website, Chef Charles Carroll, CARROLL.com. And on there is a podcast and the information about the recipe. Also, the ingredients of greatness, and that's the ingredientsofgreatness.com, which is also a direct link for the book. The book is fantastic. It's in front of a lot of great people right now as far as a possible movie. John Mann is brilliant. He's an amazing guy, and we think it's going to be pretty special. I think it's going to be, and what a story that is. Dr. Seuss got turned down how many times? John's a 7-time best-selling author, and he has 20 books out there. And we had a lot of publishers that just said it didn't quite fit their niche. Well, I know in my heart we're going to prove them wrong, because food is in everybody's world. And we have wonderful life lessons in the book, so we're pretty excited.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing story, and I can't wait to get my hands on it once it comes out. So we'll definitely have all of those links in the show notes and available at millennialmm.com/podcast for anybody listening to this who wants to go pick some of those up. And check out Chef Carroll's website. There's a lot of cool resources on there. And Chef, thank you so much for joining us today. This was an awesome conversation, and I'm so pumped that we had you on the show and that you could share these lessons from, a totally different side of the professional world that we don't always get insights to. And I think that a lot of what you shared carries over into any industry, any initiative that people are getting, and people just need to start punching those keys and get started.
That's it. Brad, thanks so much for having me, man. It's been a real pleasure.